Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan, and today we're going to be talking about comic books. Now, this isn't going to be a review, it's more of a talking kind of thing. I'm just going to talk about some action comics and Superman comics that I've been reading lately. And actually, well, it's not really reading lately. I read them a few days ago, thanks to a friend of mine who let me have copies of his issues, or to let me have his copies so I could read them for a bit. I took some notes, and I want to talk about it now. And I'll probably end up following the series through my friend, letting some build up and then read them, or I might find a way to collect them myself. I'm not really interested in collecting too many DC comic books because even though I really have liked all of the DC, Dawn of DC kind of things that I've collected so far, I know that ultimately the DC runs are going to end up becoming sloppy again, and things are going to happen that are going to make me pretty upset about wasting my money on them, and I don't really want to go through that. I basically had managed to get rid of all of the things that I had been collecting from Marvel and DC. The only one that I had left was DC Dark Knights of Steel, and then I picked up the new Green Arrow series. I swore up and down that was the only one I was going to get. And then I've realized, hey, the Green Lantern one's not that bad. Hey, Action Comics is not that bad. Superman's not that bad. And there's a lot of other ones that are coming out that I'm interested in. Teen Titans wasn't bad. Or I think it's just called Titans. And I don't really want to pull myself back into that world. I don't really want to collect more DC or Marvel titles because in the broad scheme of things, I find way more enjoyment in the other Image, Boom, Opus, and other indie kind of publishers, and the stuff that I buy from them. So and I have a limited amount of money that I can spend per month on comic books. I don't really want to bloat that, or to fill that up, to waste that money on DC comic books, right? But what I think I'm probably going to end up doing is actually getting the trades for Superman and Action Comics as soon as they come out. I'm not really sure how they're going to do it for Action Comics, because starting on 1051, Action Comics became an anthology series, and it works really well. I quite like it because it all deals with the Superman family, and each kind of story is good, it's interesting, it's told very well, and it makes it really interesting to read. So yeah, let's talk about Action Comics first. So like I said, I read 1050, and then 1051 through 1055, I think was the last one I read. And basically in 1050, Lex Luthor's doing something to Union Jack, I think is his name. And he uses it to put Clark's identity back in the bottle to hide it away from the world. This causes quite a few issues for Superman. His boss, Perry, almost gets a heart attack from shock. And then Clark and Lex fight. And I was honestly really lost during this episode, this part of the story. Because I'm not really sure what's going on. They're kind of jumping from story point to story point. Clark meets with Batman to talk about the transition, and then eventually Luthor ends up in prison, and this is a launch point for the following Action Comics. And then there's also a little bit of story here that's actually a launching point for John Kent's run for the Dawn of DC, which is actually the Injustice title. It's done by Tom Taylor, and I'm really not interested in that. I don't really care about John Kent. Everything I've seen about him feels like he was good when he was a kid in the Super Sons, and as an adult, it's not really working. And I don't know, it doesn't matter. And then we also get to see the return of Metallo, which is actually directly tied into 1051 and onwards. So I'm not really sure how Action Comics works, like the continuity of it, because what's happening in the main storyline of Action Comics doesn't seem to be tying into the Superman run. So I'm guessing it's before, because the suits and the characters and the way they're drawn all look the same to what's happening in the Superman comic book, but they're not directly tying into each other. I thought it was going to be like, the main storyline of Superman also follows through into Action Comics. I've heard before that Action Comics is actually like stories of the past of Superman, and then the Superman run is the current stuff. I'm guessing that's what it's like right now. I'm not really sure. If anyone knows, then in the comments, let me know. Please, thank you. I would really like to understand how this works. But 1051 through basically everything else, the main story is the family, the Superman family, which includes two twins from Warworld, which are children, and they have more or less the same powers as Superman. So I don't know if they're Kryptonians or not. I don't think so. But you know, they exist and they're there. And also the steel aspect of the family, which is Henry John Irons, Henry Iron Johns or something like that. I can't remember his name, but his name, him and his niece are attached to the Super family, and they're keeping Metropolis safe. And they're having to deal with these bigots who are called Blue Earthers, which are basically against aliens, which kind of reminds me a little bit of Power Rangers SPD. There's this kind of like anti-alien sentiment, which is pretty interesting, and I quite like it. And then the Super Twins join the family, and they're kind of, you know, adjusting to their life. And there's actually a little bit of a plot point here where they think that John is mad at them for kind of taking his parents from him, because, you know, his parents now focus on them since John is an adult now. And I quite like that situation. I quite like that it's resolved well. And I really just like that story. I think the family aspect of Superman is really, really good. It's something I've never really experienced before, even though I knew it existed. So I quite like that. And this is the main through line for the comic line, or for this storyline, I guess, for this Action Comics. And overall, I think the story is great. I really, really like it. I like the action scenes with Mentalo. And I like the relationship between Lex and Superman. And I like, you know, the whole family being involved. They call, you know, his cousin and John, and there was this one that's Chinese, I think, which is cool. And the two twins, and, you know, everything just works really, really well. I quite like it. I think it's very, very good. Then there's another story, which is the Lois and Clark #2 story, which is where Lois and Clark and a young John move back to their farm in California, and they end up dealing with this guy called Doombreaker, and with this evil princess called Gliana, who steals John away in order to force Clark to do something for her. And it's really interesting. I quite like the story a lot. The person that is the writer for this takes over as the artist for one of the issues, and that issue looks amazing. All the other issues are not really my favorite art style wise, but the story is interesting and quite good. I quite like it. In terms of other stories, there's the Power Girl Reborn story, which is not bad. The art style is generally quite good, but it makes John look very effeminate in a way that is kind of odd for me, because when I think of Superman, and by extension his son, I think of like classically like rugged dudes, right? Like strong men, chiseled kind of jaws and stuff like that. And the way that they draw John in this makes him look very, very girly. I don't really care either way, but the way that they drew his eyes specifically just didn't really work for me. It made me kind of, I don't know, like I didn't like how it looked, because it confused me a little bit, because I thought it was actually one of the like a new version of Supergirl based on the one from The Flash, and I was kind of confused, and I was like, oh no, that's supposed to be John Kent. And then it made sense, but it was also kind of weird. But this story is pretty interesting. Basically, Power Girl now has the ability to punch through the psychic realm or something like that. She can psychically activate her powers and deal with people's trauma directly. It's kind of interesting premise. It kind of works, but also I think the way that they word things, the way that they make the characters speak, is a little bit too ridiculous sounding, even for, you know, the fact that it's comics, and so melodrama and drama and, you know, these kind of like ridiculous situations can and will probably work. Just the way that they do the dialogue sometimes just doesn't work for me. The art style works for all of the female characters. I don't really like how they portrayed the male characters. I don't like how they did Nightwing or what's his name? Gar, Beast Boy, or John. John specifically was the one that made me the most confused. Like I didn't really understand what was happening with him. I didn't like how it looked. But the female ones are fun. They look fine. And then the last story that started in 1054 was Steel, because Power Girl was moved on to its own series, and with the Power Girl special, and then eventually she's gonna have her own Power Girl series. So they need a new story, and they started the Steel story. And so far, it's boring. It's about steelworks. It reminds me of like the Atom stuff in the Green Arrow show, in the Arrow show from CW. And although I like it in terms of like watching it, reading it was kind of very boring because, you know, the Superman comic, the main story, Lois and Clark 2, and then even Power Girl was all about using their superpowers to fight crime and to do things. And the Steel one is mostly just corporate talk in a office setting, which just it like slows down my enjoyment of the comic book a lot, and so it makes it really difficult to really feel like I'm enjoying myself when I'm reading that part of the story. So yeah, I don't know. It's not my favorite, honestly, but everything else was really, really good. I quite like everything that was happening in Action Comics, and I thought about picking them up physically. You know, trying to go find the back issues and dealing with that. But honestly, like I said, it's just too much money at this point. $10.50, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would actually end up being what, like $30. I might as well just wait for the trade for that. And with the Superman one, it's still more doable. It's only 4, so it'd be like $16. That's a little bit more doable, but I don't know. I just don't want to do it. If I wait for a few more issues, they'll have the trade for the first arc in Superman, and then I'll be able to pick that up for like 14 or 15 once Amazon gets its hands on it, right? So yeah, in terms of the Superman story though, it's pretty good. Like, I'm kind of confused, like I said, about where Action Comics actually fits into the Superman story and how it connects, but I like both quite a lot. I actually really, really enjoyed it. It's very, very good. So yeah, these first 4 issues of Superman are good. Lex Luthor is in prison. He gives Superman his company, and his secretary, who's this kind of very buff lady, she looks super hot though, is like, okay, Superman, we're, you know, part of your company, how do we help you? But also ultimately she does still work for Lex Luthor, and so she forces Superman to interact with Lex Luthor as often as she can. But it works really well. I quite like their dynamic. I also really enjoy the dynamic between Superman and Lois, because Lois is now the leader of the Daily Planet, I think is what it's called. And I quite like how they interact as well. But yeah, basically the main villain that shows up initially is Livewire, and then I think Parasite, who's this like purple Hulk type thing, is the big character. And then Metallo, of course. Eventually, I think he does end up coming up over here for a little bit. Or maybe not. I honestly don't remember. It's been a bit since I read this. But the main character that they're dealing with is Parasite. And then we get introduced to Marilyn Moonlight, which seems to be some old legend of Metropolis, which reminds me a little bit of the Court of Owls. But I'm not really sure that it's related to that. It just kind of has that vibe. And then Scream, who happens to be the latest bad guy that we deal with. And actually, it kind of ends on that cliffhanger there with number 4, because Jimmy is younger than both Lois and Clark, and it seems like he's dating someone, and then it turns out that date is Scream, that girlfriend is Scream, and you know, Superman's about to deal with her, and Jimmy's like, oh wait, chill out, I love her. And it was pretty funny. I like that little aspect. It was supposed to be very dramatic, but it just made me laugh. But overall, pretty fun, good stuff. I quite like it. Everything is good. And my favorite aspect here was how Superman has to deal with Parasite. Sorry, not with Metallo. And how he calls in his family. He's like, okay, guys, I need some help. Please bring in the rest of the Superman family, because Parasite is like supercharged. And I really like the idea that Lex has enemies, and now they're Superman's enemies because Lex is in prison. And I really like that setup. I really like how that's working. And it reminds me a little bit of how Arcane had that story with the main bad guy and the kind of crazy scientist that he knew, and with the guy that has the cane. And I also like how they're using kryptonite as a booster instead of a downer, to kind of use on villains in order to supercharge them so that Superman has a more difficult time. Overall, Superman in Action Comics has been really, really good. I really have enjoyed the Dawn of DC dynamic that they've got going on. The one thing is that they're already trying to start a new big project called Night Terrors, and I don't know if they really want to have two things like that. Like the Dawn of DC is basically a relaunch or a reboot, but it's a soft reboot. But do you really want to have a giant event immediately after? Like, why do you have to do that? Just like chill and let people enjoy the comic books and like leave it alone, right? I don't know. I think that this kind of idea of eventivizing everything, making everything an event, and making everything feel like it has ramifications is tiresome, because people are going to stop caring about the ramifications if they don't really matter, because circular storytelling, which is comic books, and what's the point of a giant world-changing event if it doesn't actually change the world, and if it doesn't do anything because in 2 issues it has to be reset. I don't know, it feels kind of weird for me, but it's kind of interesting. I did really like the Action Comics and the Superman runs, and I'm definitely going to try to collect them via trades, and I'm having a lot of fun reading them. So yeah, if you guys have not checked out any comic books before, the Superman run and the Action run are pretty interesting if you're interested in Superman. If you like Man of Steel, if you like the old Justice League show and stuff like that. So yeah, there you go. That's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Let me know if you've read these and what you think about them. Let me know if you're a big DCU fan or not. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.